When my husband and I arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, she only invited my husband inside. When I tried to enter, she glared at me and said, "You're not needed here," and slammed the door shut. I was shocked. I gently opened the door again, but she glared at me with fury. "I heard about it. Your parents are in debt, aren't they? We don't need a wife like that," she said, and slammed the door again. I stood there, stunned, with my bags in hand. Inside, I could hear my husband and mother-in-law laughing and having a good time. I realized I didn't need to put up with this kind of treatment, so I quickly left. My name is Nancy. I'm a 32-year-old doctor working at the hospital my parents founded. I met my husband, John, when he was admitted to our hospital after an injury. He's charming, friendly, and a great conversationalist. Even though he's 5 years younger, he seemed mature and dependable. We got married after a year of dating. He works as a vice president at his father's company. My mother-in-law also worked at the company. Both his parents were thrilled when we got married. Your parents run a big hospital, and now a doctor is becoming our son's wife. It's like a dream. We're so glad to have you, Nancy, my mother-in-law used to say. Every year during Christmas and other holidays, we would visit my in-laws' house. They always welcomed us warmly. I would bring delicious food and drinks as gifts, which they used for New Year's celebrations. My mother-in-law would lead the cooking, and even though I offered to help, she would decline, saying, "Nancy, you work hard as a doctor. Just relax, your family. Don't feel like you have to do anything." My husband would agree. I always looked forward to these visits. But today was different. My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were an enemy, her gaze cold and piercing. This was the first time I had experienced such coldness from her. Dead at my parents' house. I had never heard of such a thing. I have a younger brother who is also a doctor, and we both work at our family's hospital. Recently, my father called me to discuss his health, but there was no mention of any debt. As I drove home, I remembered a conversation I had with my husband a week ago. Both of us have busy jobs, but that day we happened to come home at the same time. My dad's retiring from being a doctor. He says his eyesight isn't what it used to be, especially for surgery, so they decided to close the hospital. I told him. My husband looked shocked and exclaimed, "What? The hospital's closing? Do they have debts or something?" I'm not sure about debts, but they're planning to sell the hospital property. So I won't be working at the hospital anymore. I'll be taking a break for a while, I said. But before I could finish, I received an emergency call from the hospital and had to leave immediately. "We'll continue this later," I had said, but there was hardly any time for it afterward. My husband claimed he was busy at work and came home late, and with my night shifts, we hardly spoke. I'm sure he exaggerated our conversation, thinking my parents' hospital had closed due to debts and that I was involved in paying them off. He must have told his parents that. Still, the cold treatment from my mother-in-law was unbelievable. Lost in these thoughts, I was heading home when I heard a phone ringing from my bag. Locked out by my mother-in-law, I had driven off with my husband's belongings still in the car. His phone was in the bag, ringing non-stop. I had never looked at his phone before, but thinking it might be urgent, I decided to check. I pulled over, took out his phone, and tried a few passwords. Knowing my husband's aversion to complications, I figured it wouldn't be too complex. As I thought, it unlocked with his birthday. The caller was a woman named Susan, a name I hadn't heard before. Checking the history, there were numerous exchanges with Susan. The messages were shocking. "I want to see you soon. I wish I could be with Susan forever. I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays. I'll miss you. Once I get the money, I plan to leave her." Really? That makes me happy. I love Susan the most. It seemed my husband had been cheating on me. I had thought of my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law as kind-hearted people. I was the only one back home, and I couldn't shake off the contents of his phone. I went into his study looking for more evidence. Opening a drawer, I found photos of him with an unfamiliar woman, apparently from a trip, and hotel receipts. There were other shocking discoveries. Unable to come to terms, I decided to visit my parents' house. When I rang the doorbell, my mother opened the door, surprised. "Why are you here so late? You look pale. Are you okay?" Seeing her caring face, tears streamed down. Noticing my state, she wrapped me in a blanket. My father, sensing something was wrong, asked what happened. I told them about the in-laws and their unfair treatment. My mother was shocked and my father was furious. "It's so terrible. Ungrateful people." It turned out my husband's family business wasn't doing well. They often approached my father for financial help, which he provided, thinking of me. Maybe you should play along for a while and see their true colors, my father suggested. It seemed intriguing at the time. The next day, I returned to my in-laws' house and shouted at the entrance, "I'm sorry for being an immature wife. Please let me in." I brought various gourmet ingredients and fine wine as gifts and finally gained entry into the house. My mother-in-law, seeing the luxurious gifts, smiled greedily. Behind her, my father-in-law and husband gave me cold stares. "We only treated you well because we thought you were the daughter of a prestigious hospital. Now that we know your family's hospital is drowning in debt, you'll work hard as a wife," she said. "Understood," I replied. From then on, the harassment towards me was relentless. "Come on, start cooking," she ordered, kicking me towards the kitchen. Using the ingredients I brought, I prepared dishes and served them. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband eagerly began eating. "Hey, we're out of wine. Bring the next bottle. You're so inattentive. Is this all you cooked? You might be a smart doctor, but you're a terrible housewife," they complained, though they finished every dish. When they were done and I tried to eat, my mother-in-law slapped my hand, causing my fork to drop. "What are you doing sitting? You think you're eating with us? Housekeepers eat leftovers in the kitchen." "So, I'm a housekeeper now?" I asked. "How dare you talk back? With all your family's debt, John, do you feel the same way?" "I never liked your arrogant attitude, Nancy. I tolerated it because I thought your family was wealthy." "Listen to Mom. I'll keep you around as a housekeeper," he replied. Hearing my husband's true feelings, I was stunned. I had hoped he was just going along with his parents, but that hope was shattered. He had married me for my family's supposed wealth and had been pretending all along. I realized that my husband's current behavior was his true nature. I ended up eating leftovers in the cold kitchen and was left with a mountain of dishes. "Save water and wash with cold," they demanded. Washing dishes with icy water in the freezing winter was cruel. It was so cold that my whole body trembled. For sleep, my mother-in-law pointed to a shed with no heating or bed. "Where is the bed?" I asked. "What, you think you're getting a bed? There are old towels and cardboard in the shed. Make do," she replied. I understood their true nature. Thankfully, I had recorded their abusive words. I had no more business in this house. That night, in the freezing shed, anger towards my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband kept me warm. I'll never forgive them. Late at night, after they drunkenly passed out, I drove back to my parents' house. After a good night's sleep, as I was packing the next morning, the door burst open. My mother-in-law and husband stormed in. "You think you can just leave without making breakfast? What's the meaning of leaving your husband behind?" they demanded. Their contemptuous looks were terrifying. It seemed my father-in-law was at work, but my husband and mother-in-law had come to berate me further. "I am done with both of you," I said. "You dare talk back to your mother-in-law and husband? You're even worse than I thought. We can divorce if you want, but if you initiate it, you will pay compensation. Maybe you can sell the hospital's land. It should fetch a good price." "We'll take that," my husband sneered. "That's a good idea," I said sarcastically, but my husband just smirked, thinking he had the upper hand. Then he threw a paper at me. It was a pre-filled divorce application. "If you don't do as I say, I'll use this," he threatened. "Good, this clears things up for me. What, you thought I would beg you not to leave? You think a bankrupt hospital and drowning in debt have no choice but to cling to you, right?" I said. He was completely mistaken. While it's true my father retired and closed the current hospital, we plan to relocate to a new facility near the train station. My brother and I would work there with me as the director. Far from being in debt, we had more than enough assets. Upon hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law turned pale. "That's a lie, right? You deceived me." My husband stammered. "I tried to explain, but you didn't listen and jumped to conclusions." "So your family is still wealthy then?" my mother-in-law mumbled, panicking. "Can we forget everything that happened yesterday and today? We have always been on good terms, right?" she pleaded. After all the insults, she now wanted to forget everything. It was laughable. "I'm shocked that you have spewed such terrible abuse at me and now ask me to forget everything. Remember, I'm just the housekeeper, right?" "No, that was a misunderstanding." "I'm sorry, please let it go," my mother-in-law pleaded. "It's too late. I know your true feelings. By the way, my father will be taking back the $100,000 he loaned to your company." "What? How did you know about that?" "We don't have that money." My husband started to panic, realizing the gravity of his mistake. "Nancy, I'm sorry. I should have defended you from Mom. I promise to protect you from now on. You mean protect Susan, right? How did you know about Susan? You were cheating while pretending to work late. I have all the evidence. I showed him the photos and email exchanges on my phone. He stared at the evidence, sweating profusely. You will be the one paying compensation. Susan was just a fling I met at a bar. I'll break up with her. Please forgive me. He began to apologize, looking pitiful as he drooled onto the floor, making him look miserable. That's not all. I showed him a photo of a life insurance policy taken out on me and a detailed pamphlet about car maintenance with a marked section about tampering with car brakes. You not only wanted my family's money but also my life. I have consulted the police so you can't harm me anymore. My company's in trouble. I need the money. Please help me. Don't joke. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on. I never want to see your face again. As he lunged at me, my father and brother emerged from the back room, grabbing his arm and protecting me. My husband, pinned to the ground, cried while my mother-in-law stood there stunned. The house was purchased under my name. I'll be selling it, so please leave as soon as possible. My husband and mother-in-law, who always had an excuse not to leave, were sadly sent away by my brother. After that, I got a divorce. I received compensation from my husband and the woman he cheated with. He kept begging to get back together, but when I threatened to consult the police due to his persistence, he stopped coming around. Through a lawyer, I demanded repayment from my father-in-law's company, and the $100,000 my father had lent was safely returned. My father-in-law's business, already struggling, went bankrupt with a lot of debt. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband now live in an old apartment, juggling multiple part-time and day jobs but can't seem to keep up with their debts. I work as a director of a newly built hospital with my brother's help. We are dedicated to helping those suffering from injuries and illness. It's fulfilling every day. I bought a comfortable apartment near the hospital and am enjoying living my own life.